So when I started this YouTube channel almost 4 months ago, I had some very high expectations, not unrealistic, just some high standards. I had timelines in my head in terms of what to expect in 30, 60, and 90 days. And even though this channel is still, under 4 months old, I genuinely thought that things would be moving a lot faster by now. Now, this is not because I expected 1 million subscribers overnight, but because I thought hey, look, I've actually done this stuff that I'm talking about in regards to personal finance and career. I'm not just reading books and repeating quotes like others. So in my head, I'm thinking this should give me a leg up. And to be fair, progress did happen. Views went up from, double digits to triple digits. I know it's not a lot, but when you're first starting out, it is. But here's a strange part. Even when things were technically working, it didn't feel like success. And that disconnect messes with a lot of people because it almost did with me. Now, that feeling has a name. It's called expectation debt. This is basically defined as the emotional burden of just setting unsustainable goals because you gave yourself a timeline that was just way too aggressive. So instead of feeling proud of your progress, you just feel unsettled. This could happen not just with content creation, as in my case, but also with money goals, career goals, as well as, weight loss goals. And this is really dangerous because this is when people start to make some emotional decisions. So as far as my progress, here's the uncomfortable realization that snuck up on me. Our value compounds quietly before it compounds loudly. And this takes a lot of patience, just a lot more patience than people like to admit. And I wholeheartedly understand why a lot of content creators quit. Not because they're bad at it, but because just the early phases feel like you're just talking to the void. Here's a different way to look at it, and this applies far beyond YouTube. The problem isn't that progress is slow. The problem is that progress is delayed. And delayed feedback is something that we're still accustomed to, or I guess not accustomed to. Here's what I mean. When you work out, you feel sore. When you study, you eventually take a test. And when you save money, the balance changes, right? But with content, with investing, and with careers, the feedback loop is invisible at first. You're essentially planting seeds in soil that doesn't show cracks for a very long time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing is happening. It just means that you and I, we're both still underground. And this is honestly the main reason I wanted to make this video, because I see this pattern constantly. People want results really fast, and if they don't get them right away, they assume something's wrong, or worse, that they assume that they're the problem. You see, we live in a microwave culture. If we don't get results right away, we start to, mentally check out. And social media makes this even worse because we're constantly surrounded by before and after transformations, 30-second success stories, and just, 5-10 minute highlight reels. So your brain starts thinking, oh, this should happen a lot more quickly. But that's not reality. That's just editing. And this applies to everything. I'm talking careers, paying off debt, investing, and health as well. If you're trying to perform better at something that you care about, the timeline is almost always longer than your motivation window. And that's where most people quit, not because they weren't necessarily capable, but because they just misjudged the clock. So that's why I wanted to share my own experience in real time as this amateur content creator. And this video is actually meant to make sure that you don't quit at the exact moment things are about to compound. Because most people don't quit because they chose the wrong thing. They fail because they quit during the boring phase. I'm talking about the phase where nothing is quite exciting yet, nothing is obvious yet, and nothing is just validating yet. That's not a warning sign. That's just the process. Anyways, this is why a lot of people just end up self-sabotaging. They confuse slow feedback with bad decisions, quiet periods with failures, and just boredom with stagnation. So what do they end up doing? They overreact, they jump strategies, they start chasing trends, and they abandon things that were just about to work. In investing, this looks like panic selling, and in careers, this looks like just constant switching without a specific plan. So I've got 2 principles that I hope will help others that are in similar situations. Principle number 1, time is a filter. Here's the first principle that simplifies just everything. Time filters out people who confuse speed with effectiveness. Look, the first 100 days of anything aren't necessarily designed to reward you. They're actually designed to test you. Can you show up without applause? Can you improve without any kind of validation? And can you stay calm without any kind of certainty? Most people can't, and that's okay, which is why the ones who can eventually look very lucky. Principle number 2, early metrics lie a lot. Look, early metrics are directionally useless, but they're emotionally very loud. Look, in my case, views and subscribers are the main things. Like this could be something else for you, but early on, they tell you almost nothing about trajectory. What actually matters is, are you learning faster? Are your decisions cleaner? And is your thinking just less emotional this week compared to last week? Those invisible metrics predict everything else. Look, now this part right here matters a lot. And I'm not oblivious to this. You have to have a timeline because not everything deserves infinite patience. And I'm not anti-timelines because I've actually given myself one. If by X date, this channel isn't showing clear directional progress, I'll just make a rational decision to end it and move forward. Now, that's not necessarily quitting, that's just cutting losses intelligently. Look, the key is to ensure you decide your exit before emotions start showing up. That's how you stay calm instead of desperate. Now, there's also something else I don't think we talk about enough when it comes to success. A lot of us say we want it, but we're not actually ready for everything that comes with it. Look, I'll use myself as an example here. If I woke up tomorrow with 1 million subscribers, I don't honestly think I'll be ready for it. And I don't mean that in any kind of humble way. I mean that like quite literally. 1 million subscribers isn't just a number. It's a huge responsibility. Even if only a fraction of those people are truly paying attention, that's still thousands of people trusting your thoughts, your ideas, and your judgment. That carries a lot of weight. And the truth is, I didn't start this YouTube journey because I wanted to trade one version of being chained to a screen for another. My goal here is not to recreate the same lifestyle that I left in the corporate world. What I want is balance. I want time with my family, and I want to build something that's meaningful without it necessarily owning my entire life. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm not actually putting in the level of work right now that would justify that kind of audience anyway. And look, and even if I magically got it overnight, I don't think I'm actually ready to carry it well right now. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but we see this all the time. It's the same reason why people who win the lottery with no financial literacy end up in worse shape than they used to be. Look, on the surface, it looks like a blessing, right? But in reality, they weren't necessarily prepared for it. And because of that, it ends up destroying them. And look, I think success works the same way. Most of the time, if we don't have that thing that we're asking for yet, it's usually for one of 2 reasons. It's either because we're not ready for it or we're not working at the level that requires it. Look, for me right now, I'm pretty sure it's probably both. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just clarity. Because look, readiness is built and earned over time. And the early phase isn't necessarily punishment, it's just preparation, at least in my eyes. So for me, the focus isn't necessarily trying to rush growth, it's just getting better, showing up consistently, adding more value so that I can end up becoming that person who can handle what I'm asking for when it eventually comes, if it does. And I truly believe that if we do that long enough, time will take care of the rest. But there needs to be a mindset shift first. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this at all. Look, people who actually understand long-term systems, they don't freak out when nothing seems to be happening. They don't rush decisions just to feel like, they're being productive, and they don't chase noise just to feel relevant. They understand that most effort actually looks pretty pointless before it starts to look pretty obvious. So they deliberately build slowly with patience. And when the momentum finally does show up, it's not surprising at all. It just feels like it was overdue, like about time. So let's be clear about what the first 100 days of necessarily anything are. They are not for results. They are not for validation, and they are definitely not for feeling good about yourself. The first 100 days basically are a test to see how emotionally reactive you are, how bad you need external feedback, and whether you can tolerate uncertainty without self-destructing. So here's the reality. You're not behind, and you weren't necessarily doing anything wrong, but you were using a frame that rewards impatience and pushes people to quit right before anything has time to work. Look, once you see that, there's no excuses left. You either end up accepting that any kind of meaningful progress is slow, quiet, and uncomfortable, or you just keep jumping from one thing to another, hoping the next one feels easier. Nothing about this suddenly becomes motivating. It just becomes honest. So, hey, if this way of thinking makes sense to you, you're probably not looking for shortcuts or any kind of reassurance. You're actually looking for a framework that holds up over time. And that's what this channel is for. Thanks for watching.